Life Audio.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer. We'll start the conversation with Peggy and her guests next.
The Historical Jesus Podcast is the sweeping saga of the life and times of Galilean Jesus of Nazareth, as well as the faith, religion, and church founded to honor and disseminate his acts and teachings. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the many great works of Christian theology, literature, architecture, music, and art inspired by the words and deeds of Jesus Christ.
It's a crazy world out there, moms and dads. I'm Catherine Seegers, host of Christian Parent Crazy World, the podcast that tackles tough topics to help you be a godly parent in an ungodly world. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool, a nonprofit that empowers families to home educate diverse learners. To learn more, visit spedhomeschool.com. Here's Peggy Ployer.
Today we are going to talk about homeschooling from to-do list to purposeful pursuit. And my guest today is Dawn Jackson. She is a retired homeschool mom, an education consultant and learning specialist, and she's certified also as a special education teacher with a master's in special education, as well as a learning styles coach and a health coach. She is the owner and director of Solimar Academy, a program for students who think outside the box and for parents who want to support a system for curriculum, tutoring, parent education, consulting, and collaborative and proactive solutions and coaching for their child. Additionally, she offers through her organization weekly, monthly coaching, student record keeping, transcripts, diplomas, one-on-one consulting for K-12 students and their students' first gap year. Her philosophy is that children should be addressed as a whole child, given the time to grow up away from institutional settings and explore their natural talents. I'm super excited about this conversation, Dawn, and excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Peggy. This is such a delight and such a blessing. Thank you. Absolutely. Yes. And such a good conversation. I think this time of year, we find a lot of parents going, am I what I'm doing? You know, we kind of hit that time where the books are kind of put away a little bit, holiday things are going on, and we self-evaluate whether we say it or not. And whether your child is being homeschooled or they're in an institutional type of setting and you're going, is this really working the way I expected it to? We're going to kind of address that from both sides to help you just process that through, because it's a good time of year to make some resets, to make some changes, because your kids are in reset anyways. They're all excited about the holidays and they're not thinking about what you did before. And you can kind of change things a little bit without upsetting the whole apple cart. So this is a good time to just join in on this conversation. If you're with us live, we would love to know where you're from, what you're thinking about. If you have any questions, what is this? What does it mean? To-do list, a purposeful pursuit, or I don't see any purpose. I'm just barely making it through the day. What do you got going on? We want to know that, and we want you to be part of this conversation too. So Dawn, I always ask my guests when they come on just to tell us a little bit about yourself, some background. Why are you passionate about this topic, and maybe just a little bit about your own homeschooling background too? Sure. Thank you so much for that question.
Yeah.
I started in teaching right out of high school. So I was blessed to get a job as a preschool assistant, and then was asked to come over into a special ed program at birth of 5-year-olds. And I was there for about 5 years. In the course of that time, I was studying to be a journalist. And the heart strings were pulling, and I decided to change my course in education and get my ECE unit. So I did my early education units and continued on that path. And then I continued to go to college and eventually did get a gen ed credential, a special ed credential, and a master's. What happened though was I was so excited to be a teacher and to be able to touch lives of children and have all those opportunities. But what happened was I just felt like I was pushing against this wall of opposition.
Yeah.
And just story, my very first year of teaching, I was pulled into the principal's office and scolded for being different than the other teachers in my classroom.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, but I even said to her, isn't that a good thing? I wasn't trying to be impertinent or anything, but I was serious that I'm creative. I didn't have the curriculum that everyone else had. So I invented some, found what they had. And yes, on the night of open house, my classroom looked different. And so I was literally scolded for that.
Wow.
And I knew that was just the moment. That was one of those spikes in time. And I started feeling resilience throughout because I did think out of the box. I am an inventive personality. I'm a curious person. So I think that's how kids are, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, why would a child get up and start walking or try to talk or grab for things or whatever they do? Because they're innately curious. Yeah. And so I was scolded and I didn't understand what was happening. I just thought, well, maybe I'm not a very good teacher, or maybe there's something wrong with me.
That self-doubt always comes in.
I know, we always do that, the first thing. And mommies are probably doing that too as well.
Right.
But when I actually went over to special education, there was a small shift because I had a resource class and I had a little more freedom. But where the push was, is that they would come to me and say, you have to teach them curriculum at the level of what grade they're in, even though they couldn't read and they couldn't do math at that level. And I was like, well, what about skills, building their skills, their IEP goals? Nope, it doesn't matter. You teach them this curriculum, what they have to learn so you can support the teacher in the general ed classroom. It was a huge economy. So what I did is I started teaching kids on their learning styles. I was doing a master's degree with an emphasis on motivation and learning styles, and also autism. But those were like my emphasis, like, how do I get a child to be motivated? These kids don't want to learn. They're coming in third grade and they hate learning and they hate school. And it was breaking my heart. I'm like, no, there's so much to know. There's so much to do and explore. Right. So when I started incorporating the multi-sensory approach, I guess, to learning, it shifted a lot of things. Kids started to get rid of the thinking that I can't do anything. And they started to see their giftedness in art or writing or drawing or whatever it was. And I started to see the position that I was in and really and truly, as John Gatto explains, how we as teachers were in there to really not teach children, but just to keep this system going. Yes. Dumbing children down. And it's really sad. I mean, if you have a child that is naturally gifted and does well in a school setting because they're a strong auditory learner, those kids get A's. That's great. But if you have a child that's challenged with learning disabilities or just not learning disabilities, but just the way they take in information, maybe they learn hands-on. Maybe they learn with interacting or more visuals, things like that. And no one's advocating for them. No one's teaching them to advocate for themselves. There's going to be a struggle. And those were the kids that I was getting. Kids that teachers were saying, he won't learn. He can't, she can't learn. So they try to put him over there in special ed, and the rest is history. Yeah. I got in trouble for that too, because I would challenge the school psychologist, like, well, did you give all of those assessments all in the same day? Like 3 hours of assessments. Is that a fair judgment of whether or not it's in process? And I'd start having these kind of arguments. I'm surprised I wasn't fired, to be honest.
They needed you, actually, so they didn't fire you.
It's true, but Peggy, I eventually walked away after I had teachers diminishing and putting my students down so much I couldn't stand it. And I said, I have to go. I can reach 15 kids a year, or maybe I can reach hundreds of children a year and hundreds of families, really. And the poor parents, like, they would come in, they didn't know. They were at the mercy of whatever anybody, any jurisdiction, anyone would slap or title onto their child. They really didn't know. And they were afraid. They were taught to not speak up, not to ask questions, because that's the way they were taught in school. Right. Just do what you're told.
Exactly. Yes. And when we don't question the system continues on, whether it's good or bad. And unfortunately, you've kind of led to this, is we bring that into our own homes too. And when we homeschool, we can make the mistake of saying this top-down approach of we mandate, the curriculum says, and therefore we do. It's a very backward way of looking at it, because as you're talking about, that child is unique, and the learning styles and everything else that's going on is not being considered or looked at all. Absolutely. Yeah. And so then you started, I'm assuming you got married, had a child. Is homeschooling, was that on your radar at all?
Absolutely, it was. I did marry into a family that was strong into homeschooling, so I was watching them do everything, and I was so amazed at it all. So I do have 3 children, as you can kind of see them behind. They're all grown up now.
Yes.
And but basically, it was just like a natural flow that didn't start, she's in kindergarten, let's homeschool. It was from the minute they were born, knowing that we are schooling. So the things that we would do with reading aloud, read alouds are so important. Singing, music, verse, poetry, all kinds of children's literature that they were exposed to, classics that were just amazing. I did kind of go into the classical education by the time that I did homeschool. And at that point, even created a historical timeline that was sold all over the world. And because my daughter loved history, and it was a very hands-on timeline where kids could cut out the figures and have a little travelogue and then read books around that period of history. So it was really, really fun. It was a kit. It was a kit that they. So just making school about her interests. What was she naturally leaning toward? Mm-hmm. And then you can wrap everything around that. You can wrap math around that. You can wrap writing. But the key is knowing your child, which we'll get to, which is something I would like to share.
Yeah.
One more thing on compulsory education. And I know that our families that are here and that are listening to this and come to the site obviously have understood that that's not working for my child.
Right. We are the population that finds that out really fast.
Exactly. And thank God for that, but the school is trying to shove these shoes on your child that don't fit. Right. And so one thing that John Gatto said about compulsory schooling, I'm going to read a quote, said, compulsory education is but a nominal goal of the public schools, which are actually designed to prevent children from learning too much, thereby making them into unquestioning, dependent, and obedient citizens. Yeah. And so the only reason I bring that up, even though we're not in that, you may be as a mom or as a parent thinking, like you said, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing okay? Maybe they would be better in a situation like that where they're getting all these services, where, they're getting more supports. And I'm here to tell you it's not true. I sat day after day watching children have the life sucked out of them. Right. And they would come into my classroom completely defeated, little second graders blopping their heads on the desk, just worn out. It was heartbreaking. And we would do this little fun thing where we'd go outside and take all the bad thoughts out of our head and throw it over the balcony and say, goodbye, stinking thinking, and then, start fresh again. But then they would have to go back to that. and they were humiliated. I would walk into classrooms where students were yelled at in front of me because it was my student on my caseload being yelled at and shamed in front of all their peers. And I always said bullying begins in the classroom. It really does, because that's where the kids are shamed the most. Really good kids that start out the year, by the end, they're breaking pencils and they're, angry, and they have all these feelings they don't know how to express. But what I'm saying also that for is this, that we as parents who homeschooled or didn't homeschool our children, we were affected and impacted by the school system. The school system we grew up in. If you were homeschooled, wow, you're so fortunate. And so many parents know that were homeschooled, they're just like these really calm people that, they're not much. And then those of us who have been through the system were more intense about it, which I was as a parent. And honestly, Peggy, I wish I could sit here and go, oh, I did such a great job. No, I actually didn't. And I made a ton of mistakes. And that's why my passion is to support and help parents to build the family. So I was just learning so much, and that's probably a whole nother podcast. It's a little story in my book someday. In my book.
Yes. No, those are all really good points that, we forget that we bring so much in to home education that we didn't plan on bringing in. After a word from our sponsor, we'll dive back into this conversation.
Has fear stolen your peace? I'm Jennifer Slattery, lead host of the Faith Over Fear podcast, helping you fight your fears and grow your faith. Subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by SPED Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.
We have these wonderful thoughts and plans of how it's all going to work out, and then we realize just how much of our background, our ideals, everything shapes how we approach all of that, parenting in general, but then educating our child added on to that, because there's so many of those preconceived notions, really lies, that we have been told are the standard. And I give a whole talk on the special education process, and just how in 1975, that was the first year that special education was actually mandated. People don't really realize just how new of a system that is. And it was mandated by laws. It wasn't mandated by the needs of a child or children. It was mandated because they were forced to take these kids into public school. And there's where all the laws started, and the IEPs, and it's all based on these mandates. And it has nothing to do with the kids. It's, how the classroom needs to be set up to fulfill all the laws that put it in place. And when we look at that, why are we the ones saying this is the best option? No, it's not. God ordained a family and gave parents children, and we are the ones who are equipped the most to educate our kids. And so I just love what you're talking about. And
And it's interesting because even as well-meaning as we are, and even teachers in the school system, we really can't change what happened to us and what they're even fighting up against, right? They're fighting up, even though their hearts, like my heart for my kids, I was their advocate. When their parents dropped them off with me in the morning, they were my chickens, and I was going to protect them. But the thing that we have to be careful of is that we're not trying to replicate the classroom. One of the big questions, and probably the biggest part of my coaching that I do with parents, sometimes I start out and they're like, yeah, can you coach my child? But then I'm coaching the parent, right?
Right. Yeah.
And one of the biggest thing is, how do we learn to change the mindset of what school looks like? Mm-hmm. Learning looks like. Why does it have to be 9 to 1 or 10 to 2? Why isn't it just we encompass all of what we're doing, and we can count that, because it's It's important. It's not. Now, I will say this. If you are in a charter school type setting where you're still mandated by certain laws and certain curriculum, and even though they say it's personalized and individualized and, customized and all those words, I beg to differ at times. I know, because I worked for a charter school for 10 years, a homeschool charter school, and it's not. And you can try. And even, like I said, you do the best you can, and it's better. It's better than nothing, but it is, it's a carrot that they dangle with the money that they're giving you for the curriculum and the supplies. And it's great if you're okay with not having your full freedom to really, truly create the program that your child needs for you, and your family, not just your child, but for the whole family to work and flow together. And that's what I love to do is, what is this family structure like? What are the needs of this family? And how do we make this work for everyone, but enhancing the child's giftedness and their talents and strengths and passions, natural passions things that they're interested in life. Right.
Well, as you're talking about, it seems like that we just naturally, as we gravitate or are in systems like this, we lose our creativity, our curiosity, and then our kids do too. Can you talk a little bit about that, how that is lost, and just give us an understanding better of what is lost, what we've lost as parents, what our kids lose by this institutionalized based approach to learning?
Correct. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. One of the things that I think is lost, and I'm going to even own this for myself as a parent, and I get to say this now, they're all grown, and thank God he was with each one of them. But I didn't know my children, Peggy.
Yeah.
I didn't know my children. Everyone's circumstances are different. And sometimes it just depends on the parent. We could be more laid back. We could be more unschooling. We could be more, structured, and we're going to do this classical education and it's intense. Right. You're going to learn Latin, and these are cards on the wall. I don't have a visual learner, but I have cards on the wall for her to become a visual learner.
Yeah.
Like so when we don't know our children, that I think is our biggest problem sometimes. Yeah. We can go years slapping all this curriculum down and buying all this really expensive, great stuff, going to all these co-ops and groups, sports events, and we're busy. One of the things I treasure in my childhood was the gift to be able to go back into the woods of Pennsylvania and collect tadpoles for hours.
Wow.
And I was alone, and I was like 7, and no one was worried. It was just
right.
Right. And we don't let children try. We don't let them fail.
Yes.
We don't let them explore. If you take a child out into the garage and they want that hammer and nails and a piece of wood, why are we afraid to give it to them, even though they're 2 or 3 years old? Right. So just letting them explore, do things to solve problems. I think that's part of the problem. We just keep giving them things to do. Yeah, right. She's not writing. She's not reading. How do I get a child to read that can't read? And essentially what I would say to that parent is, then don't get them to read. When they want to read, they will learn to read. But in the meantime, read aloud to them. Yeah. Find out what their learning style is. If we don't know our kids' learning style, and I'm just telling you, read this book, but you're a visual learner, I'm not reaching you. I'm not creating a passion for learning inside of you. I'm just trying to as a parent, I'm trying to feel good because look, when dad comes home, look what they did today. I literally had a parent like this where the dad was kind of what we call, I don't want to say type A, but, very organized, like pesky parent. And then we have the real laid back mom. And she was like, oh, we're all just like loving each other and it's fun and we're doing art. And she was happy. She'd seen her kids excel. She had never seen them want to learn so much as when they had freedom, right? In their day, there was structure, there was curriculum, a very beautiful curriculum. I think it was Beautiful Feet or one of those.
Mm-hmm.
But Dad would come home and go, "What are you doing? Like, what? This looks crazy." So what I had her do was just kind of have this chart on a little whiteboard in the closet and just kind of jot down things that you guys did that day. And if he asked that question, just go see the chart. So that kind of satisfied Dad, like, okay, we're doing something really great here. But it also gave Mom a sense of, you know, he's not going to bug me, but we can still have our freedom. And those, the kids really did excel. The boy, I think it was 5 or 6, he didn't want to read. He had no desire for school. He was reading books, sitting on his bike or his skateboard or in his little bucket of toys, wherever he was. And just, you know, under the table. I tell parents all the time, teach under the table.
Oh yeah. We had many lessons under the table.
Yeah. I'll never forget that time in my teaching year when a little boy came in and he climbed underneath the table and I went right under there with him. And he sat and waited and he started talking to me. Yeah. And then we did it again the next time. And the next time I said, "Do you want to go under the table?" And he's like, "No."
Been there, done that. Yeah. Well, I think that's some really good advice. We had one parent, Abigail, write in a question ahead of time. And if you're on our email list, just know that you can do that whenever we have a show coming up. We send out a reminder the night before, and you can submit questions ahead of time to our guest. But Abigail had asked, how do you suggest the best way to reach or teach a 6-year-old who's minimally verbal and resists reading a book? And so I think you kind of just answered that. Do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I would add this, like, I don't know what she exactly means by book learning. The only thing I'm thinking is like a fine motor, kind of like tracing letters or
right.
Like that. And so again, I go back to, and I won't touch a child until I know what their learning styles is. I won't really advise you, but but you as a parent, you can kind of tell if you just see how are they naturally taking in information. If that child doesn't like drawing with a pencil or writing with a pencil, that is not their modality for learning. Right. But they have to learn how to write. Correct. So what I do with kids like that, if say I were in a compulsory school and I had to teach them how to write, you know what I would do? I'd make sure I'm using fat, chunky pencils, colored pencils, gel pens. I've even used it where I write out the word really big and then they trace it with watercolor. Color brush. So they get to get some color and then trace the letters. That way, all of a sudden they're writing and they're loving it. So you tap into, wow, this child's really artistic, but she doesn't want to be like so controlling. Then do it really big on a big whiteboard or a big piece of white paper where they're really interacting with the whole body experience, right?
Right.
My son was in 1st grade. I took him out every day after school, got a big box of chalk, and he would write out some spelling words on the ground. And I'd say, "Okay, jump on the word that has the ass sound." And he would jump on it. And I'm like, "Can you read the word?" And so we did the whole body connection. You can do that with math. You can do it with a basketball. But finding out, do I have a real wiggly child? Then if you have a wiggly child, you need to do activities where they're moving.
Absolutely.
So you can't just, I've seen this just in really small children who aren't even 2 yet, how they interact with the world in a gross motor way. I already know they're going to have to learn that way. They're going to have to connect in a whole body. What you're asking a child to do in a notebook is a fine motor skill. She may not be ready for that or enjoy that. So that's why up it up a little bit with some fun art supplies and bigger paper, things like that, Mom. And you don't have to have this little piece of paper. If you are in a school where they're asking you to turn in work like that, I would say, nope, that's not working. We did it on this big piece of whiteboard. We're taking a picture and sending that to you.
Yes. Yep.
It would be. It should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And, by doing those experiments too, if you don't know what is going to work with your child, you'll eventually figure it out. You just have to be willing to think a little bit outside the box and
they'll tell you. They'll show you.
Absolutely.
So it's like reading and everything. The best way to get a child to want to read, and by the way, I have to dispel a myth too, but is to read to them. And never ever believe just because your child reads well, they're a good writer. It's not true.
No.
If they're good readers, they're good writers. No, there is a structure to writing. There is a way to make it fun with like thinking maps and chunky words and stories. That's a whole nother podcast about writing. But there's lots of ways to do that to make it fun. And that's what I say. Really teach to how your child learns, and also understanding their disposition. We talked about that.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing our child, like that is where I failed because I was so consumed with all these things we were going to do.
Right.
And all these other things and things, but I did some good things. We created murals on the kitchen walls, and we did oceans and other murals that we were learning about. And that was good. But I was still trying to shove on shoes on some of my kids that didn't fit them.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of turned their heart away from school. Especially my oldest, poor thing. Like she's the one that I really experimented on the most. And she got all the whammies. But yeah, so you have to be careful. Each child is an individual. I had a mother come to me. She said, I have 5 children. All 4 of them learn with this curriculum, but this number 5, he won't have it. And so like figure out, with our little son, what is his learning disposition and his learning styles, and what are his interests and talents? And once we were able to do that, we were able to find the curriculum or customize the curriculum that matched that child. So it's really fun when you can find those solutions. And it is part of listening to them. But you're right. As parents, we have to think out of the box and be a little more creative, or ask for help.
Ask for help. Exactly. Because some of us just aren't as creative, and it's okay because other people are, and they want to be able to share those ideas. And there's just a plethora of ideas out there. I think some, I don't know about when you started homeschooling. When I started homeschooling, there weren't a lot of options. Now there's so many options. You can just get overloaded with ideas and curriculum and so there's just a lot of things out there.
No, Peggy, because like I see a lot of families on Facebook, a mom will cry out for help for a certain thing. And then you have 6 different people giving her different solutions.
Right.
I mean, I feel overwhelmed by that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
All you have to do is figure out, how does this child learn? How do they really learn? What is their natural intrinsic motivation? What makes them tick? What motivates them? You may say, well, we start school at 9, but that child won't move till 11. That is their internal clock, and you have to kind of
exactly.
Parents have to navigate that. The biggest thing, that I'm getting a lot of questions about right now is self-regulation. What if you have a child that freaks out and starts throwing things and doesn't want to cooperate? Right? Is that an important question? How do we self-regulate? I'm working with a couple of families like that right now, especially the little guys when they're in a school setting or in a class even. And now they're freaking out because they're overstimulated, they're overwhelmed. How do we teach them self-regulation? And there's a whole bunch of things to do around that. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've had some discussions on this show in the past about vagus nerve and how to reset that. And there's so many things, and there's so much going on with our kids, and we forget that it isn't just about the book in front of us or, the curriculum and the child. There's other factors that could be at play too that are making our kids off. And so I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of gut health and sleep and nutrition. And those are things we don't often think about. Those were some huge wake-up calls for me early in my homeschooling days. And so I'd love for you to be able to chat a bit about that, because we haven't talked about that on the show in a while. and just let parents know just how much these things factor in, and then how can they know that it may be a factor as well.
That is such a great question. I just want to segue a little bit off your last comment about children in their environment. Mm-hmm. So not only they're experiencing what's going on in the world, but they're also impacted with how we feel. So
yes, absolutely.
So starting with you as the parent, and this is where my passion is. I just got little tinglies right now because my passion is to support parents. I always thought, I'm going to coach kids, and I do. And we support them in every way. But when that parent isn't held in a safe space, and that means looking at the whole parent as well as looking at the whole child. And I recently did this where I went into a home and I did observations, sort of like the homeschool nanny. And I was I'm the homeschool nanny now. Where I went in and observed the environment. Now that I had the information on the child and also the mother, and what each of them needed in their environment. Mom needed structure. Kid had chaos, wasn't bothered by it, but there was the struggle all the time.
Right.
But into the gut health, what happens is when we're not eating, and you guys, there's a ton of stuff out there on YouTube about this, so I won't go deep. But when we're not eating, when we're not the ones preparing our food, when we're trusting outside sources to cook for us, to pick our food, the quality of our food, the type of meat or whatever they're feeding us, we're just subject to whatever's going to come into our bodies. As far as like eating for kiddos that have diagnoses of special needs, so important about gut health. So if you notice your child is not sleeping well at night, is overreacting after they have that snack they have to have, or they're craving, because typically cravings go with allergies. And so if your child's craving that, sandwich every day or that cheese stick, chances are. So what I always encourage people to do is like get that blood work done on food sensitivities and see if there's a yeast issue. Oftentimes
that's what ours was.
They have that yeast in the gut. And so you want to make sure they're on a really good probiotic. They're having some semblance of really good vegetables every day and a protein. If your child has to have a little sugar treat, or this is just the way your family rolls with a cookie or whatever, fine. Just make sure they have a foundation of protein, a really good foundation of protein, because then the insulin levels don't hit up so high. But my point is all of that impacts sleep. And what they're finding is that when we don't get that REM sleep, we're actually kind of like on the borderline of little sociopathic, and frontal lobe and all that is just not properly working.
Right.
So if you have behavior issues in your home and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is too hard. Start looking at some of those things. If you can do more research yourself or have someone who can help you create a food plan. And I'll be honest with you, it's not easy. I worked with a family in kindergarten when I was a school teacher, and I shared with mom about food dyes. And I was just saying, just get him off the fruit gummy things with the food dye.
Oh, yes.
She took him out. This is a guy that would come into class every morning, start jumping across the desks, like walk across them. Thought it was cute. And he was cute. So I wasn't a kindergarten teacher, because I would have been like, oh my God, so cute though.
Yeah.
And he was so entertaining and just loving. And then he'd get scolded, and he would come into my class and he'd just feel so forlorn and forsaken and sorry. When she took all of that out of his diet, he was like, these, what they call ADHD and all that just subsided. And I'm not saying it's a magical cure, but there's
a lot of factors. There are a lot. Yes.
Yeah. That show these. It's sticking to it is so hard, you guys. Like every time I go to the grocery store, I'm bombarded with bad food. And it's hard. It's tempting. I'll just get those Cheetos, they're like not too long ago, I bought a bag and it was like blue corn, but it's blue organic corn. How bad can that be? And so, you know, they've got something for everyone, but moderation, getting, and, you know, stop eating, stop snacking at night. You know, the things that wake your child up are the digestion that's still going on when they're sleeping and they're not deep REM sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go to bed a little hungry. And it's good for kids to know that too. I mean, I've done so much research too on fasting, and I mean, kids should not fast. Adults should, but we live in so much of an age of excess, especially in the United States, and our bodies were not created to feast constantly. We feast and we feast and we feast, and we forget that we need to also fast. We are created that way. Our bodies need that time to not digest, and they need to, our organs need to rest too. And we do get better sleep when we take that time off, because that's when all your liver, everything resets itself overnight. And if it's busy working, it's not going to be resetting. So,
yeah. And if your child's hungry at night, you can give them like a cup of water or warm water or tea, or you can give them a little cup of bone broth. Bone broth is very healing. I like to make bone broth from whole chickens or different bones that I acquire, and, you know, make sure they're grass fed and they're organic and free range as much as you can. And that's the same with your eggs and all those things. Eggs, if you go to a farmer's market, check with the farmer and ask, do they have corn or soy? And if they do, don't buy those eggs. So I find the farmers that don't feed the chickens those things, or get your own chickens. That's even better. But the corn and the soy, some kids are sensitive to that. Mm-hmm. But that's sleeping. And then, of course, you know, I'm highly against melatonin for children, like even adults now, they're finding these studies around that. But the little chamomile tea, it's so calming, that little warm bath before they go to bed. Have a ritual for sleep, for calming down, turning down the lights, reading the stories, things like that. So, yeah.
And it's all these things add up. And I think what we do is we get so caught up in the school list, you know, the schedule of the school. And then we're like, okay, so I've got to like throw out the rest of this stuff that I know I should be doing for health in general for my family. And we get completely sidetracked by this school schedule that now dictates our entire life. I know. I've been there. I was that parent too. And I had to have a big wake up call, like Dawn's talking about, that said, no, that is like the least most important thing going on in your house right now. It's your overall family's health. It's your relationships. You know, we got to get back on track to what really matters. And that's what that purposeful pursuit is. Yeah.
You know, my new coined term right now is family curriculum.
Oh, I love that.
I love personalized curriculum and individual, and we do all that. But I'm like, what about family curriculum? So oftentimes, like with our school, when we do a profile on a child, we'll also give that to the mom and the dad. And then even any other siblings that want to take it. So we can look at the whole family. Because if dad's considerations, how do we plug dad in? If he's working all day, how do we plug him in for connection, for being a part of the story of this child's learning journey? There's so many creative and fun ways. We have to know dad's interests. And
yes. Yeah.
And then we combine them with, oh, you love science? So does your son. So does your daughter. Let's do some fun science things. And so now we're creating this whole family dynamic, but also, like I said before, we might have a dad who's like, what are you doing all day? This looks chaotic. This is scary. It's creating fear for me. So we create a plan so he can, you know, have more calm and peace about what he's paying for and, you know, what it's costing in the long run. But so not sure where I was going with that, but
But no, we found the same thing. My husband loves history. And so the dinner table conversation would always be around history, because then they could teach Dad what they learned about what historic events. And he would, of course, be super excited because those are things that he's interested in. And so, that family, just family mealtime. Let's make the importance of that as well. So many families have gotten away from that. And it really it irks me that our emails are opened up mostly at 6:15 at night.
Yep.
And that's when my team members, when our team was in full force, they would start texting me. And I'm like, are you not making dinner? Are you not eating with your family? No, they aren't. That is so, so important. And when you come back to this family curriculum idea, I think that we lose a lot of that family togetherness when we rush through that meal, when we skip that meal, when we skip that conversation, that community. We need to have conversations instead of just passing by one another as we live in the same house.
That's so amazing. The new world order for compulsory education is to have longer school days. They want to serve children dinner. That's the long-term goal, is that they would have less family time together. See, that's the thing. If I could change anything, it would be that parents would know their children. And if that means, I remember I had a mom, just came to me several months ago saying, we are finishing this math book before the end of the school year. And I said, why? And she said, because we're going to finish it. This is what we're going to do. And this is the kid really struggling with a lot of learning challenges. The way the book was not working for the child, but we're going to finish it. We're going to finish it. So at the end of that whole thing, I said, and it was actually at an IEP meeting, she was telling me this. And I said, if I could give you any advice, would you want it? And she said, sure, absolutely. She goes, I can see that you know what you're talking about. You've been there. You have a lot of compassion and empathy. I said, this is my advice for you. And this was like April. I said, stop teaching. Stop homeschooling your child. Just stop.
Yeah.
Until you know your child, until we at that point, we were using the same assessments, until we have this assessment and we really know how your child learns and what their discovery, hopefully they're still curious, right?
Right, exactly. Oh yeah. You can deal with some trauma there too.
And I have a story around that. I have a great story about how to reach a child like that, but she did.
Wow.
And this little guy was diagnosed with autism, never would talk, never would share. She called me up. I'm getting chills again. And she called me up and she said, he's talking at the dinner table. He's sharing about his day. He's talking to us.
Wow.
Like, she was blown away. She was just blown away. It was all change. Her whole, and I'm telling you, this is a mom that did every program, everything.
Right.
And nothing worked because she was missing that child.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying every parent doesn't know their child or there are parents that don't know. I'm not saying that because obviously that's not true. What I'm saying is, could there be more?
Right.
Could there be another level? Because when we are parents teaching, we're looking through this lens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. The kids, they have their own lens too. So is there a way for us to encompass both? And that's kind of my passion, is like, how can we really know our children? Because I did at that. And I was more consumed with doing instead of being. And that would be pretty wonderful if the world could change and we could teach children in the way that they're meant to be taught, and also in their best natural giftedness. And just really quick, I had a parent in a workshop, because I teach workshops, and this mom raised her hand. She said, Miss Dawn, had you been my teacher, I'd be a rocket scientist today. But instead they put me in a special education classroom and they didn't know what to do with me. And that was the mom teaching her kids now. And she was so happy to understand like their learning styles. And there was a lot of stuff out there about learning styles and, oh, it doesn't work and whatever. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about just, auditory, visual, kinesthetic. There's a deep level in creating their disposition and their interests and talents and all those beautiful things that make up that child.
Absolutely.
Guys, I don't care if your child's nonverbal. I don't care if they're doing very little. There is a soul within that human that God put in there, and that human has a purpose.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm after.
Yeah.
To help find.
Yes. That's very much in line with the question we got from a parent, Jessica. She asked, "Is it important for me to include my daughter's interests?" And then she had prefaced it that this is kind of related to PTOT, speech, and some ABA therapies. But the pediatric developmental behavioral team, even my family, say otherwise. Any thought or suggestions on this topic?
Well, by now you know how I feel. I'm very passionate about their interests and talents because that's baloney. And I take everything with a grain of salt and kind of just, mama, follow your heart. You know, follow your heart. Like, does that resonate in your heart? You know best. You are your child's best advocate. And if you feel like, oh, but I don't have an education and I didn't go to school and I didn't even finish high school, I don't care. You are the best person for the job. You really are. And even better than I could ever be, because no one knows your child like you. And when I say earlier, like really know your child, I'm talking more on a how do they learn level. Obviously, you know your child. Obviously, you know what makes them sad and happy. But I'm talking about really knowing how they take in information and what makes their heart sing, right? And doing the 5 love languages with your child, that book is amazing. And then other things that you can do, a little assessments to learn them a little bit more. But I think that's just ridiculous. I don't even know.
Well, maybe that mom, Jessica, needed to hear that today. What these people are telling you is ridiculous.
But there's a balance. You know, there's a balance. And if you want to continue with your services and all that, that's fine. But there's a balance for your child to thrive. Your child to thrive and be excited about learning. The thing that breaks my heart is when I get 4th graders who don't want to learn anymore, who literally hate school. And okay, this is not to scare anyone, but those kiddos that grow up in the system that hate school tend to do bad things in the world because they're angry and they're nobody looked inside them. Nobody saw them. So we have to make sure that's not the case.
Yeah, that's very true. And there's a balance. There's when our kids don't have the skills to survive in the world, they can also get on a bad track. But when we put them in such a program, even within our home or in a school, where that program dictates so much about what they do that's not good, and does kill that love of learning, then we're doing the same disservice either way. But finding that happy medium of, where is this child? Where are they equipped? Where are they learning? Where are they taking in that information? And that is not a waste of your time. I hope parents understand that after this conversation and all that Dawn has been sharing. This is not a waste. It is not something that, you'll look back and say, oh man, I wish we would have spent that time finishing that math book. No.
My child crazy and I hate the world right now. Does that make sense? Yeah, just some shifting them into more of the way they learn curriculum. And that's not always easy. So, we're like geeks when it comes to curriculum, my coaches and I, because we love matching the right thing. And when you see that happen and the kids thrive, it's like so simple, but it's not sometimes, but like you said, because there's so much out there. I wanted to read a quote from Dumbing Us Down by John Gatto. And I think every parent, if they could read this, it's one of my highly recommended. He said, we need to invent curricula where each kid has a chance to develop private uniqueness and self-reliance. And I want to add critical thinking skills. And I'm not just talking about, but I'm not talking about like just, this free for all thing, but where they're really, really asking good questions about life. And parents
absolutely
questioning their questions. Not telling them the answer all the time, but what
yes.
And I used to do that with my kids with television. I turn it off and go, what do you think about that character? They're like, Mom, turn it back on. I'm like, no, really. Crazy, but it would get them to think. Asking questions is so imperative to their critical thinking skills.
It is. Yes,
and learning to
exactly.
think out of the
Because we're
box.
just used to like absorbing and then saying that's truth. And there's so much stuff out there that is not truth. And you can absorb it and it can drive you crazy.
One of the things he says in his book is that the kids that came in to the school that were told, you know, you are the brightest shining star and what your thoughts matter, and they were spoken into, you could not change those kids and control them and make them little cogs in the wheel like the government wanted education to be. That's all they wanted, was just to produce people that would work in their labor technologies or whatever, not thinkers, not creative thinkers. Mm-hmm. And so, but those kids that have that creativity still alive and that curiosity, you can't change them. They're strong. And that's the beauty of homeschooling. And he even advocates for homeschoolers that, you know, kids that are homeschooled are like 5-10 years ahead of other kids their age. Why is that? Because they're having opportunity for curiosity and creativity. And it's a beautiful thing.
It absolutely is. Yes. Yeah. This has been an amazing conversation. Before we leave, though, I want you to talk a little bit about Solimar Academy and how parents can connect with you. I will in the show notes have this link shared so you can just click on it instead of having to quickly write it down or figure out how to spell it if you're listening to the podcast. But tell us more.
If anyone is interested, I'd be happy to talk to them. I'm Dawn at SolimarAcademy.com. So that's a quick, easy way to get to me. So basically what Solimar Academy is we always say it's for kids and families that think out of the box. Like if this is truly a private school where there is freedom and you have the ability, if you want to follow your state's curriculum, you have the freedom to do that. If you want it to be more geared toward who is my child, how do they think, what makes them thrive? And we've had so many kids come in that the mom or parents are like, they're fully burned out. They won't do anything anymore. Mm-hmm. And they're, you know, in school, they're stubborn. They won't even try. And then we create a curriculum for that child that's customized and personalized around their interests, like skateboarding or surfing or whatever that is. Awesome. Mm-hmm. And they study that. And guess what? All of a sudden, learning's not that boring anymore. So that's kind of what we do. We also do coaching. We also do like the whole assessment and coaching outside of Solimar. So if you don't want to join Solimar, you already have an umbrella school or you're doing your own thing. We also do the coaching. Okay. So there's a package on our website that shows you for the coaching, the assessment, and then it's like a 2-hour coaching with follow-up and support. However you want that to work, you get to customize that. And but we do have a plan of reviewing that and then creating a plan for your child, and you know, with suggestions. But if you come into Solimar, we actually create a learning plan with the family. And the funnest part I think about Solimar is that kids get to pick their own grades. So if we don't do anything lower than a C, but for an A, B, or C in any given subject, we will ask them, what would an A look like for you in this? And of course, we might have to pad it a little bit, but we do it together. We create exactly in words what an A will look like, what a B will look like, and what a C will look like. And then we revisit that through our coaching sessions. Okay. So it's really so fun. And our coaches are always available. We're texting our kids or we're sharing things, or they're sharing stuff with us. And then we meet either weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, bi-monthly, or whatever. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much like a rubric that you make with the student. And but families need to support at different levels. And it's nice that you give them options instead of saying, well, this is what we give you. And we have parents contact us at times saying, and we're like, we're just a nonprofit. We have stuff on our website. We'll send you, go to our YouTube channel, search for somebody you connect with, and that's where they'll find you. With this show and on our podcast, that's how people connect with resources like yours. Because, we're just there to spread the news.
I love you, Peggy. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you for being on the show, Dawn. This is, it's been a really good conversation. Like I said, it's a good time of year to revisit. Why am I doing what am I doing? Is it working? Is it not? And are there some things we can change to make it work better? And everything that you talked about today was really important to make a permanent change or good change in that direction versus, just throwing a new curriculum. I think that's just like the standard is, oh, well, this isn't working, so we're just going to buy a new curriculum. It's a lot deeper than that, as our conversation today has led to.
It really does take a community. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we've lost a lot with compulsory education, is we've lost the sense of community. There's no shame in saying, I really don't know what to do with this kiddo, this fifth child that everyone else was easy. This one, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's no shame. There's a learning curve in learning. Mm-hmm. Even for parents that jump in and say, hey, I want to homeschool now. I really want to try this. I met a mom in Trader Joe's, who I'm doing an in-home consultation and observation. And it was just awesome. I was blessed to be given that opportunity. She sitting there with the ukulele, singing the morning songs. And I was like, you don't need me. This is, but just having someone validate you is huge.
It is. It's important.
Being there to a coach.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dawn. And just for everything that you shared. And our next conversation, and our last one for this year, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, this will actually be, I think this show is maybe one of our first, this will hit the end of the year or maybe the first week in January. But we're going to talk about simple methods for restoring rest in your home. I know we live in a crazy, crazy world. How do you find that rest? And so that's what we're going to talk about on our next broadcast. If you watch live, that will be in 2 days on Thursday. But if you listen to the podcast, it'll be next week. So that's all we got today. So thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks again, Dawn. Appreciate it. Visit Dawn's website at solimaracademy.com. And just especially if you're thinking, I just need some help. So Dawn is definitely someone to reach out to, and she's got some good resources and ideas for you. So, but until then, everybody, take care. God bless, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
This has been Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Do you ever hear sayings make their way through the culture and the church that seem nice in theory, but are actually theologically problematic? My name is Shara Donahue, and I'm the host of The Bible Never Said That, a podcast where we examine these popular sayings under the lens of biblical truth. We cover sayings like, God won't give you more than you can handle, time heals all wounds, and follow your heart. We also spend time exploring how people use Bible verses out of context. If you want to grow in discernment and truth, join us and subscribe at lifeaudio.com.